I stayed overnight in my late grandmother's house. I think I know what was visiting her at night. Hi. I don't really know where to post this, but I've seen similar things shared here and I need to get it out of my head. This happened 3 months ago, after my grandmother passed away. She was 87. Dementia had been eating away at her for years, slowly turning her sharp, stubborn mind into something confused and fragile. Toward the end, she would say things that didn't make sense. We thought they were just hallucinations. Now I'm not so sure. The house. My grandmother lived alone in the same old two-story house for almost 50 years. It's one of those narrow, creaky homes with steep stairs and thin walls, the kind that groan when the temperature changes. The neighbourhood is old too, houses packed close together with small side yards and warped wooden fences between them. After she died, my parents and I decided to renovate the house and sell it. It needed work. The carpet smelled faintly of dust and something sour. The wallpaper was peeling in places. There were old, mismatched locks on some doors that none of us remembered installing. Because I work remotely and live closest, I volunteered to stay there during the renovation week to keep an eye on things. The contractors wouldn't start until Monday, and this was the weekend before. I wish I hadn't offered. Her stories about the dog. For the last year of her life, my grandmother had been terrified of something she called the big dog. She'd whisper about it during family visits. It comes at night, she told my mum once. It licks me. I can feel its tongue. I don't like it. We all exchanged those looks families do when dementia rears its head. Gentle smiles, soft reassurances. There's no dog, Grandma, I'd say. You're safe. But she would grip my wrist with surprising strength. It's not a normal dog, she'd insist. It crawls. At the time, I thought she meant crawling, as in sneaking around. Dogs don't crawl, right? The first night. The first night in the house was quiet. Too quiet. The house didn't feel empty. It felt paused, like it was holding its breath. I slept in her old bedroom because it had the biggest bed and the only working lamp. I left the door open at first, but closed it before turning out the lights. I don't know why, it just felt better that way. Around 1:30 a.m, I woke up to a soft thud somewhere downstairs. I froze. Old houses make noises, pipes expand, wood shifts. I told myself that. Then I heard it again. Not a thud this time, a shuffle, like something heavy brushing against the wall. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and turned on the screen, bathing the room in dim blue light. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Silence. I waited. 1 minute, 2, nothing. Eventually I convinced myself I was being ridiculous and lay back down. That's when I heard it. The stairs. There's a very specific sound old carpeted stairs make when weight drags across them. Not footsteps, not pause, dragging, slow, deliberate. I heard it at the bottom of the staircase. A long fabric on fabric scrape. Then another. It wasn't coming up normally. It was pulling itself up. Each movement was laboured. A soft grunt accompanied one of the scrapes. Wet, breathless. I stopped breathing entirely. The stairs creaked under shifting weight, but there were no footsteps. Just that awful dragging rhythm. Scrape, pause, scrape. It was coming closer. Halfway up now. I stared at my bedroom door. The hallway light was off. The gap beneath the door was pitch black. Another scrape, closer, almost at the landing. Something bumped into the wall outside my room, then silence. I thought maybe it had gone into the bathroom. Then my doorknob twitched. I saw it move. Just slightly. My entire body went cold. The knob turned slowly, as if whatever was on the other side didn't quite understand how it worked. The door creaked open. It came inside. I couldn't see anything at first, just darkness pouring into the room. Then I heard it again, that dragging sound, but softer now because it was on hard wood. Inside the bedroom, something was pulling itself across the floor. I smelled something too, burnt, bitter, like old smoke soaked into fabric. It stopped near the foot of the bed, and then it spoke. The voice didn't sound human at first. It was raspy and distorted, as if pushed through a crushed throat. It said my grandmother's name, slowly, drawn out. Then, "Are you home now?" The way it said it, hopeful almost, made my stomach turn. I don't know where the courage came from, but instinct took over. I rolled sharply toward the edge of the bed, phone already in my hand, and hit the flashlight. The beam snapped on. It illuminated him. What I saw, he was halfway up from the floor, propped on his elbows. He had no legs below the knees, just bandaged stumps wrapped in filthy, yellowed gauze. His skin was a patchwork of horrific burns. Shiny, melted scar tissue pulled tight across his face and neck. One eye was cloudy white, the other reflected the flashlight like an animal's. His lips were cracked and parts of his cheek looked fused to his jaw. He looked like something that should not have survived. For a split second, we just stared at each other. Then I screamed, and he screamed too. His scream was worse, high, panicked, animalistic. He spun awkwardly, dragging himself with shocking speed toward the door, his elbows slamming against the floorboards as he hauled his body forward. The smell of smoke intensified as he passed. He vanished into the hallway. The dragging sounds retreated toward the stairs. I scrambled off the bed, slammed the door shut, locked it, and shoved the dresser in front of it with shaking hands. Then I called 911. The police. The officers arrived within 10 minutes, though it felt like an hour. I stayed on the phone with dispatch the entire time, whispering, sobbing, insisting someone was in the house. The police cleared the first floor. Nothing. They cleared the second floor hallway. Nothing. Then one of them asked about the attic. There was a small pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. I had never been up there. When they pushed it open, dust rained down. They climbed up, and they found him. Curled up behind a fake wall made of plywood and insulation, as if he'd built a little nest inside the attic. He didn't resist. He just covered his head with his arms and whimpered who he was. It took a day for everything to come out. He was the neighbour's son. 20 years ago, their house had burned down in the middle of the night. The fire killed his wife. He was presumed dead too. They never recovered a full body, just fragments. Apparently, he survived. Barely. Severe burns. Amputations below the knees due to infection. Psychological damage. After he was released from long-term care, he disappeared. No one knew where he went. Until now. Somehow, he had been living in my grandmother's attic. For how long, no one knows. There were empty food containers, stolen mail, old blankets, and a small bucket. The fake wall looked old, not freshly built. He had likely been there for years. The realization. After everything settled, I kept thinking about what he said. "Are you home now?" He had mistaken me for her, my grandmother. And then I remembered her voice. It licks me. I can feel its tongue. He had no legs. He crawled. He dragged himself. He was the big dog. My grandmother slept with her bedroom door unlocked. She was frail, confused, easy to approach. The thought of him pulling himself into her room at night, leaning over her, makes me physically ill. Maybe he just wanted company. Maybe he thought she was someone else. Maybe he didn't know what he was doing. But she was terrified. And we told her it was dementia. The last thing she said. A week before she died, I visited her at the care facility. She held my hand and said something I didn't understand at the time. "He's lonely," she whispered, "but he shouldn't come in my room." I thought she was talking about my grandfather. Now I'm not sure. Why I'm posting? He's in custody now. The police told us he'll likely be institutionalised. The house has been sold. I haven't told the new owners what happened. But sometimes I wake up at night thinking I hear something dragging down my hallway. And I can't stop replaying that voice. Not angry, not threatening, just hopeful. Are you home now? If you have elderly relatives who talk about strange things at night, please don't assume it's just their mind going. Sometimes the walls are thinner than you think.
Okay, so either I'm going mad or something truly terrifying just happened, and maybe I should be getting my family to safety rather than writing this. This happened tonight. My wife and I actually went out for once. We almost never do that anymore because we have a 5-year-old, but some friends convinced us to go to dinner. I had a couple drinks. Not drunk. Just that light tipsy feeling where you're relaxed but still completely aware of what's going on. We got home around midnight. The babysitter, Emma, was waiting by the door with her stuff. Everything seemed normal at first, but when I asked how Oliver was, she hesitated. She said he'd been kind of scared all evening. Apparently he kept saying something in his room was watching him. Typical kid monster stuff. She said she figured it was just because we were out and he wasn't used to it. But then she said, about 20 minutes before we got home, she heard some weird noises upstairs, like scratching or thumping. She almost went to check, but it stopped. I didn't think much of it. Old house, kid half asleep, imagination, whatever. So I paid her, thanked her, walked her to the door. After she left, I locked up while my wife went to get changed. I remember the house feeling really quiet, but I figured it was just because we'd been out all evening. Then I went upstairs to check on Oliver. His bedroom door was open a crack. The room was dark, except for the moon coming through the window. And he was sitting straight up in bed, just sitting there, not moving. The curtains were wide open, so the moonlight was hitting him right in the face. I said, "Hey buddy, you okay?" And he turned his head toward me. The way he did it made my stomach drop. I don't really know how to explain it, but it didn't look natural. Like his head turned too far and too stiff. It reminded me of when you twist the head of a doll. Then I saw his face. He was smiling, not a normal smile, like really wide. Way wider than I've ever seen him smile. Just stretched across his face. And he wasn't blinking. I stood there for a bit and asked him again if he was okay. He nodded, just once, still smiling, still not blinking. I swear it felt like 30 seconds of just staring at each other. The whole thing felt wrong, but I kept telling myself I'd had a few drinks and kids are weird sometimes. So eventually I said, "All right, good night," and started leaving. Right when I turned around, he spoke. "Don't forget to check for monsters, Daddy." But it wasn't his voice. It sounded deeper, rough, like someone trying to talk through a throat full of gravel. Then he giggled, not like Oliver giggles. This was wrong. I don't know how else to explain it. I just stood there for a second, honestly creeped out, but I still convinced myself I was overreacting. So I walked down the hall to our bedroom to tell my wife what he'd just done. When I walked in, my wife was already in bed, and Oliver was lying next to her, under the covers. My brain didn't process it for a second. I just stood there staring. My wife looked up and whispered, "Oh, hey." Then she smiled and brushed his hair. "He came in here about 10 minutes ago," she said quietly. "Said the scary thing in his room told him to get out." Then she laughed a little. "Bless him, full of imagination." I didn't say anything. I just looked back toward the hallway, because his bedroom door was still open. I could hear someone in there moving around, and I swear to God I could still hear the giggling. I don't think I'll ever feel safe in my own house again. Hey, I don't really know how to start this. I'm 16. This happened about 4 months ago. I haven't really told many people the full story because every time I try, I either sound dramatic or I feel stupid. Like, technically, nothing that bad happened. We're alive. Nobody got shot. Nobody even got physically hurt. But something definitely broke that night. And it hasn't fixed itself. My parents had gone out of town for one night. Just one. They left Saturday afternoon and were coming back Sunday morning. I was in charge of my little brother, Eli. He's 8. We've stayed home alone before for a few hours at a time. This was the first overnight thing. I remember feeling kind of proud about it, like I'd leveled up into actual responsibility territory. We ordered pizza, watched a movie. I did the whole monster check routine in his room like I've done since he was little. He laughs at it, but he still makes me check under the bed. I left the hallway light on for him. Everything was normal. Around 11:45 p.m., I was in my room on my phone. I heard a car outside. That's not weird by itself. We live in a cul-de-sac, so sometimes people turn around at the end. But this car didn't turn around. It just sat there, engine running. I remember staring at my ceiling, counting seconds without realizing I was counting. Then the engine shut off. I heard car doors open, more than one. Voices. Low. Not laughing. Not casual. I went to the window and moved the curtain just a little. There was a dark SUV parked directly in front of our house. 4 guys got out, hoodies up. One of them had something metal in his hand. It took me a second to realize it was a crowbar. And then the porch light exploded. Like actually exploded. They hit it with something and it shattered everywhere. I froze. Completely. My brain didn't go to call the police or run. It just stopped. Then they hit the front door. Once. Twice. The 3rd time it cracked. That's when Eli came into the hallway. I'll never forget his voice. He just said, "Marcus?" Not even scared yet. Just confused. That's when my brain started working again. I grabbed him and pulled him into my room. I told him we were playing a quiet game, and he had to hide in my closet. I don't know how I sounded, but he must have heard something in my voice because he started crying. The front door broke. It's a specific sound when a door gives up. I didn't know that before. It's not just wood snapping. It's like the whole frame sighs and collapses. They came in yelling. They weren't whispering. They weren't sneaking. They were angry. "Upstairs!" one of them shouted. I called 911 while standing against my bedroom wall. I could barely talk. The dispatcher kept telling me to stay calm. I wasn't calm. Footsteps came up the stairs. Heavy, fast. My door handle rattled, and then they kicked it open. There were 3 of them in my room. One grabbed me by my hoodie and slammed me against the wall. I couldn't breathe. He kept asking where he was. I didn't know who he was. That's when one of the others said, "This ain't the house." They started arguing. Apparently, they were looking for someone. A rival gang member, I found out later from the police. They'd cased a house with blue shutters and a basketball hoop. We have white shutters, no hoop. They realized they'd hit the wrong address. The guy holding me finally looked at me properly. I think that's when he realized I was just some kid. He asked how old I was. I said 16. He let go, not gently. He shoved me back onto my bed. Sirens were getting closer at that point. Someone downstairs yelled that cops were coming. Before they left, the guy leaned close to me and said, "You didn't see anything." Then they ran. That's it. That's the whole violent part of the story. They left. Police showed up. Parents came home early. Statements were taken. Door replaced. Security system installed. On paper, it's a close call. But here's the part nobody really talks about. I can't sleep anymore. For weeks after, every tiny noise sounded like boots on stairs. If a car idled outside for more than a few seconds, my chest would lock up. I started checking the locks 5, 6, 7 times a night. Eli stopped sleeping in his own room. He drags his blanket into mine and sleeps on the floor, even now sometimes. He says it's just until he forgets. But he hasn't forgotten either. He wets the bed now. He didn't before. He hides during fire drills at school because the alarm sounds like the door breaking. I keep replaying one specific moment in my head. When the guy asked if anyone else was in the house, Eli was 10 feet away, in the closet, trying not to cry. If he had made a sound, if one of them had decided to double-check, I think about that constantly. And the worst part, I feel stupid for being this messed up over something that technically didn't happen. People at school say stuff like, "At least you're okay," and I nod. Because, yeah, we are. But sometimes I wake up convinced someone is standing in my doorway. Sometimes I swear I can still smell cigarette smoke in my room. Sometimes when Eli laughs too loudly downstairs, I get this flash of panic, like he's going to attract attention. Like being noticed is dangerous. Our house feels different now. It doesn't feel like a safe place. It feels like a place that was proven breakable. I used to think bad things happened because of choices you made, because you were involved in something. We weren't involved in anything. They just picked the wrong house. That's the part that messes with me the most. There wasn't a reason. There wasn't a warning. There wasn't anything we could have done differently. It was random. And if something like that can happen randomly once, my brain keeps telling me it can happen again. My parents put in cameras, motion lights, an alarm system. They even got one of those doorbell cameras that notifies your phone. It doesn't matter. Because I learned something that night I can't unlearn. A door is just wood. A lock is just metal. And it only takes a few seconds for someone to decide your house is the wrong one. Anyway, I don't know why I'm posting this. I guess I just needed to write it out somewhere people wouldn't look at me like I'm being dramatic. If you've been through something similar and actually stopped feeling like you're waiting for it to happen again, I'd really like to know how. Because I'm tired and I want my house back. My 6-year-old said a witch was visiting her at night. I thought it was imaginary. I was wrong. I've gone back and forth on posting this because even typing it out makes me feel insane. but my wife says I need to get it out somewhere. And honestly, I haven't slept properly in weeks. Every time I close my eyes, I hear that scream again. So here goes. I'm a father. I have one daughter, Ellie, who just turned 6 in January. She's bright, funny, dramatic in that very little kid way, and she has the kind of imagination that turns cardboard boxes into castles and laundry baskets into pirate ships. So when she started talking about the witch, neither my wife nor I panicked right away. The first time she mentioned it was at breakfast. She was poking at her cereal and said very casually, "The witch came back last night." I remember looking up from my coffee and smiling the way parents do when their kid says something weird. "Oh yeah?" I asked. "What did she want?" Ellie shrugged. "She just watches me, and she says mean things." That got my attention a little more, but not enough. Kids have nightmares. Kids say creepy things sometimes because their brains are still figuring out the difference between dreams and reality. I asked her what the witch looked like. She said, "Her hair is all messy, and she smells bad, and she hides in the crack." That last part made me frown. "What crack?" She pointed upstairs with her spoon. "In my room, by the wardrobe." Now, for context, Ellie's room is an old box room in a house built in the 1920s. It has slanted floors, cold spots, and a built-in wardrobe that was probably installed sometime in the 70s. There is a narrow gap between the wardrobe and the wall because the floor isn't level. We'd noticed it before, but it's too tight for anyone to actually fit into. At least, that's what I thought then. I went upstairs, checked around, looked behind the wardrobe as best I could, found nothing, and came back down feeling ridiculous for even indulging it. "See?" I told her. "No witch!" She didn't look relieved. She just looked at me with this tired, disappointed expression that no 6-year-old should ever wear, and said, "She leaves before you come." That should have hit me harder than it did. Over the next week, Ellie brought it up more and more. "The witch touched my hair. The witch whispered in my ear. The witch said Mr. Hanley next door is bad." Then one night, while I was tucking her in, she grabbed my sleeve and said, "Daddy, she says she's going to cut Mr. Hanley open so he can't lie anymore." I laughed, not because it was funny, more because I was uncomfortable and didn't know what else to do. I figured she'd overheard something. Mr. Hanley was our neighbor, late 50s, quiet guy, lived alone, always trimming his hedges or washing his car. There'd been gossip once or twice from other neighbors about a messy divorce years back, but nothing I paid much attention to. I told Ellie that no one was going to hurt Mr. Hanley, and that witches weren't real. She started crying, not tantrum crying, real crying. Silent tears, trembling lip. "You don't believe me," she said. And that got to me a little, because I remembered something from when I was a kid. When I was probably 7 or 8, I got it into my head that monsters were going to come into my room through the window. I went to my dad about it in the middle of the night. He was old school, not exactly warm, but he had his moments. He went out to the garage, came back with an old wooden baseball bat, handed it to me, and said, "If a monster gets in, swing for the fences." It sounds insane now, but I remember how instantly better I felt. Like he'd taken my fear seriously, without feeding into it too much. He hadn't laughed at me. He'd given me a way to fight back. So a few nights after Ellie's crying fit, I tried my own version of that. A while back, I'd gotten really into darts for about 6 months, bought a decent set, practiced in the garage, bored my wife to death, talking about averages and flights and tungsten barrels, then gradually stopped. The case was still in a drawer in my desk. I took out 3 of the old darts. Not the heaviest ones, but still real darts, metal tips and all. Looking back, I know how stupid that sounds. I do. Believe me, I know. At the time, though, it felt symbolic, like a talisman. I wasn't thinking she'd actually use them. I knelt beside her bed and showed them to her. "These," I told her quietly, "are witch-killing arrows." Her eyes widened. I said, "Keep them under your pillow. If the witch comes back, you tell her to go away. And if she doesn't—" I shrugged, trying to sound playful. "You know what to do." For the first time in days, Ellie smiled. She hugged me and said, "Thank you, Daddy." I kissed her forehead, slid the little case under her pillow, turned on her nightlight, and went downstairs feeling like maybe I'd done something kind. That's the part I keep replaying. That warm and satisfied feeling. That stupid, self-congratulatory feeling. At around 2:07 a.m., I woke up to the worst scream I've ever heard in my life. Not a child's scream. An adult woman's scream. It was so loud, so raw, so full of pain and rage, that for half a second I honestly thought it was coming from outside. Then I realized it was coming from upstairs, from Ellie's room. I don't remember getting out of bed. One second I was asleep. The next I was sprinting down the hall with my wife behind me. I hit Ellie's door so hard it slammed into the wall. What I saw inside didn't make sense at first. Ellie was pressed against the headboard, shrieking, and in the middle of the room was a woman. She was thin to the point of looking hollow, dirty, barefoot, wearing what might once have been a nightdress under an old coat. Her gray blonde hair stuck out in greasy clumps. Her face was sunken, skin stretched tight over the bones. And lodged deep in her left eye was one of my darts. Not beside it, not near it, in it. She was stumbling and thrashing around the room, knocking over toys, smashing into the dresser, howling obscenities I won't repeat. Blood was pouring down her face and dripping off her chin. One hand clawed at the dart. The other slapped blindly at the air and walls like she didn't know where she was anymore. For one frozen second, my brain tried to reject what I was seeing. I think some part of me was still trying to force it into nightmare logic. Then she turned toward Ellie's bed. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, which turned out to be Ellie's little wooden chair, and swung it as hard as I could into the woman's side. She went down against the wardrobe with this horrible crunching sound, still screaming. My wife got Ellie out of the bed and ran her into the hall. I pinned the woman as best I could while my wife called emergency services. The entire time, the woman kept trying to spit at me and scream through blood. I remember fragments of what she was saying. "He ruined me. He took my house. You let her hurt me. I was waiting. That last one stayed with me. I was waiting." Police came first, then paramedics. The woman was restrained, treated enough to keep her alive and taken away. Ellie had blood on her pajama sleeve and kept saying over and over, "I told you it was the witch. I told you." The rest came out over the next couple of days. The woman was Mr. Hanley's ex-wife. Apparently she'd suffered some kind of psychotic break about a year earlier and had been in a psychiatric facility outside town. Recent staffing issues and an ongoing investigation into negligence there meant the details were ugly. But the short version is she'd gotten out. Not officially discharged. Escaped. No one had connected her to our neighborhood because, according to the police, She'd been avoiding roads and sleeping in abandoned places. Then at some point, she made her way back here, back to Mr. Hanley, back to the house next door. The police found evidence that she had been entering our home for at least several days, possibly longer, through the crawlspace access under the stairs. Our old house has narrow wall voids and dead spaces that don't show up unless you know exactly where to look. There was a hidden opening behind Ellie's built-in wardrobe where some warped paneling had partially come loose. That crack Ellie kept talking about. It led into a narrow wall space. A space with blankets in it, food wrappers, bottles, and, according to the detective, a kitchen knife wrapped in cloth. She had been living inside the walls beside my daughter's room, listening to us, watching her sleep, talking to her. And she had been planning to kill Mr. Hanley. When the detective told me that, I actually had to sit down because my leg stopped working. Ellie wasn't imagining a witch. She was describing a filthy, mentally ill woman with tangled hair and a rotting smell who emerged from a gap in the wall at night and whispered about murder. She'd told me exactly what was happening, in the only language a 6-year-old had for it, and I had given her a weapon and called it a game. The police said that probably saved her life. They believe the woman came fully into the room that night for the first time because she'd decided Ellie had become a problem. Either Ellie was talking too much, or the woman had convinced herself Ellie was somehow in league with Mr. Hanley. There's no way to know for sure. But when she approached the bed, Ellie did exactly what I told her. She reached under her pillow, and she swung for the fences. Mr. Hanley moved away last week. I can't blame him. My wife wants to sell the house too, and I think she's right. Ellie sleeps in our room now. She won't go upstairs alone, and sometimes she asks if the witch is dead. We tell her no, but she can't ever come back. The worst part is, Ellie seems to trust me even more now, like I protected her, like my witch-killing arrows were some brilliant dad move. But that's not what happened. What happened is my little girl came to, me scared, told me the truth, and I filtered it through nostalgia and parenting cliches until it almost got her killed. So yeah. Believe your kids when they tell you something is in the room, even if they don't have the words for what it really is, especially then.